Hello, my name is Amy. I am 28 years old, a recovering heroin addict. I'm really blessed to be here today to tell my story. Beyond appreciative of how things have turned around for me. Essentially, things started for me with prescription pain pills, as they often do. I had 3 surgeries back to back, essentially, and started getting prescribed Percocets for those surgeries. That kind of bore the love for opiates for me. I realized I felt like a better person. I felt like I was more talkative, more confident. I could, get things done more successfully, and I felt like I could maintain that. And for a little while, I did. Eventually, those pain pills ran out, and that's when I really got hit hard with the whole addict thing. As everyone can relate, I did not want to accept that I had a problem until all of a sudden I didn't have the pills anymore. And I realized I had a major problem. I couldn't go to work. I was freaking out because I couldn't go to work and function correctly without them. So from there, it was pretty quickly that I started doing Roxy's. At the time, I had a really beautiful but twisted friendship with the girl who really, we kind of dove into that whole world together. She was my best friend, but we were just the worst of influences on each other, and honestly just kind of drove each other towards that addiction even more. We started getting Roxy's, and it was pretty quickly after that I graduated to heroin. One day I couldn't get the Roxy's. I thought that we were going to get the Roxy's, and instead we ended up at the dope man's house. And that was the first time I had tried heroin. And I went home, and at that point I was so sick. There was no, you should just walk away. I was an addict. I was in full-blown addiction. I needed my fix, and I was going to do anything to do it, including heroin. That didn't matter to me. It did, but it didn't. And I went home and I cried myself to sleep. But you best bet that I had a bag of heroin under the bathroom sink, and that's when all those devastations that come with addiction really started setting in with me. But I honestly was really, really good at saving face. I did not look like an addict. I didn't really play the part of an addict for a while. I held a job down. I kept my car. I always had a place to stay. I always kind of felt like I was above that life. I was quickly reminded that I'm not, no one is. But I guess my journey to getting clean really started when I read someone's story. Her name is Elena. And at the time I was working, I was supposed to be working, but instead I was sitting in the laundry room floor at work scrolling on Facebook. And I scrolled past a picture, and I can still remember with everything in me to this day, that picture. It was of Elena. She had the tubes in her throat, and her mom was wearing a pink shirt, and she was laying, just like this on her daughter's hospital bed. And Elena had overdosed from fentanyl. I believe it was her 5th overdose. She was 22 years old, beautiful, has a little boy, had the world in front of her. Unfortunately, just like me, she was hopelessly addicted. And before she was able to get help, she overdosed. Her mom had to take her off of life support. And I remember I had read countless stories, hundreds of stories of people overdosing. I knew all the dangers. I knew all of these things, but I continued to use. But for some reason, that day changed everything in my path for me. I read her story, and I went home and I told my parents that I was an addict. Of course, at that point, they had kind of known what's going on, but this was the first, I really just don't want to be this person anymore. I'm going to admit to it. And I finally did. I ended up reaching out to Cheryl, and it was actually this beautiful, odd like constant itch on my shoulder for like 2 days that I needed to reach out to this stranger. I didn't know her. I didn't know where she lived. You know, all I knew was her name from a news story, and her daughter had died. But I spent a little time and I found her on Facebook, and I reached out to her. And to this day, I actually still talk to Cheryl. It bore this really beautiful friendship, support system. You know, when she took Elena off of life support, she promised Elena that their story would change lives. And then here I am to change my life completely. You know, the moment I decided to hold myself fully accountable was the moment I really started recovering. Now, I had multiple relapses in that period of time. I started with Suboxone. Unfortunately, at that time, you know, I did want the help, but I didn't want to truly do the work that was involved with it. And so I ended up relapsing. I tried going to the methadone clinics. I ended up relapsing. You know, I just wasn't ready. And it's an unfortunate reality of addiction. And people ask me all the time, like, what can I do to help my daughter or my husband or my friend or whatever? And it's really heartbreaking to tell people you can support and love and give kindness and empathy and resources, but you can't make an addict want to get help. There's just, I loved my parents with everything in me. And it never dawned on me what I was doing to them, that I was worrying them every night. You know, my dad, he is actually, to this day, dealing with health issues that came with problems from drugs when he was 16, 17 years old. He's in stage 4 kidney failure. He got hepatitis C. I believe he was in 2nd grade when he was diagnosed with that. So my dad's been sick my whole life because of the choices he made when he was very, very young. And, you know, now that I am clean, I see so clearly I was killing my dad by killing myself. That's pretty devastating to realize. But at the time, did I ever think about how my dad had to go to sleep every single night and worry about me overdosing? No, I did not think about it until I read Elena's story. And then I started thinking about it. And that really just changed the path for me. You know, I think it's important to realize that, you know, in recovery, it's not always just a one-step thing. It took me a lot of steps, you know, a lot of relapses, a lot of lessons. Ultimately, after I got off the methadone, I did go back into active addiction for quite a while. But one day I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I remember going to my dad and crawling into his lap. He has a recliner that I've crawled into since I can remember. You know, I'm 28 years old and I still crawl into that recliner. And I crawled into his lap, and I just started crying. I just started crying and screaming so loud, the loudest I've ever screamed. It was like I was just letting every ounce of the pain and the misery that I had been feeling out. And I just begged him for help. I said, I need help. And my dad told me that night, I will never forget it. And it's still the driving force to my sobriety to this day. He told me, Amy, I cannot die knowing you are sick. You know, he very much so realized it is a disease and that I didn't want this. I didn't want to be this way. It was just how I was, you know? And so at that point, that is when I decided to finally go to detox. Previously, I'd only done the methadone, the Suboxone. I'd only done the medications thinking that, you know, I didn't need any of the extra help, you know, the therapy, the mental health help, any of those. I didn't need any of that. But finally admitted there was so much going on and I needed help. So my dad, God bless him, stayed up relentlessly calling hospitals and detox centers. And my understanding is most of the time you have to actually go through a hospital to get into a detox bed. But my dad made it happen where I didn't have to. I got told that I had a bed at a detox center at 8 p.m. on a Sunday. And I went. And at that point, I had finally gotten to the, you know, I really desperately wanted to become the person that I knew I should be, you know. So I went to detox, and I did get clean from heroin. However, I made what I would like to say is a mistake, but honestly, it all led to where I am now. I met a man in detox, and the typical rehab romance, like, yeah, we did that. And everybody was joking about, like, haha, invite us to the wedding. 11 days later, we went to the courthouse and we had a wedding and we got married. I did not tell my parents, nobody. The way I told my dad is my hero. I have put him through so much, but the way I told my dad, we just walked downstairs. My dad had just met this guy the day before and we handed him the marriage certificate. That was a day, but at that point, my parents very much so realized I had already done what I was going to do, and I was married to who I thought was the love of my life. At that time, I was on what they call the pink cloud. I thought I finally did something right. I chose to get off the drugs. I chose to go to detox. I got back on my mental health medications. Like, I'm doing well. Of course, God put the love of my life right in front of me at detox. But at the time, I really genuinely thought that. Crazy in hindsight, but it was good for maybe a month. But there was a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse. Clearly, he was not the man I thought he was. I mean, let's get real, though. I married him after 11 days, and it just devastated me. All of a sudden, I realized, like, marriage was very real to me. When I committed to him, I really thought that meant something. And then all of a sudden, I had this, to be frank, piece of shit man in front of me that treated me like I was disposable and, snuck around behind my back and cheated, and just all those awful things that I ever thought of in a relationship were happening to me with my husband, and I did not understand that. And it was pretty quick. We relapsed. That went out of control pretty quickly. And at that point, we actually had a wedding, like a little backyard wedding ceremony for my family and friends. And the night before, we had relapsed on meth. I told myself that because it was meth and not heroin, my drug of choice that I was doing, that I was okay. I was in control, that I could be a functioning user and everything would be okay, blah, blah, blah. We know exactly how that goes. The night before the backyard wedding ceremony, I went to pick up some meth, and he had a bag of heroin. So of course, I bought some heroin. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor with my brother standing over me. I had overdosed. There was fentanyl in the heroin. I don't even remember putting the heroin up my nose. I don't remember any of it. I just remember my brother, begging me, where's the heroin? Where's the heroin? I gave it to him. He flushed it. My brother had to do some pretty, I guess, intense stuff. I really don't know, like something to my chest to bring me back. He's ex-military, and it left like a big bruise. And I remember the day I realized, like, I had to fix all of this and leave this situation was when my husband told me that, because at my wedding, you could see it, or my ceremony, you could see it. It was bruised up. And he told me that he had lost respect for my brother because my brother hurt me. And this is a man that's abused me, like, we won't even go into all that. But I realized, no, that's the man that saved my life. That's the man that's been there for me through everything. That's the man that warned me about you, and I didn't listen. But now I'm going to listen, and I did. Pretty quickly after that all happened, he left, and I was devastated, but I was free. I wanted to die, but I didn't. And so I chose to go to rehab. I remember I went into my mom's room at like 3 a.m. in the morning, if I'm being honest, high as hell on meth, completely wide awake, but just desperate for help. And I had been talking to a friend actually that I had used with for years that was in rehab. And he had told me, like, Amy, come to this place. He told me all about it. And I just remember like sitting in the floor of my room realizing like I did not care if the drugs took me. I died and I got a second chance. My brother saved my life, yet here I am gambling with it again. That is insanity as we know it, and I just, I might have felt a certain way, but I still had that logic, that piece of me in the back of my mind that knew this is not the life I wanted. And so I think it was really important that at the moment that I felt that way, I held myself accountable and I went and told my mom. I think if I hadn't done it at that moment, the next day I would have woken up and I would have pretended like everything was okay, but I didn't. I went and told her, hey, I've relapsed. I need help. There's this rehab, and I told her all about it. And 24 hours later, I went to rehab. Scariest decision of my life, but by far the best. And that's why I say that marriage, I want to say it was a mistake, but it wasn't at all. Because as much as I hate to say this, it didn't matter what my dad said, my brother said, my mom said, my friend said, nobody. It didn't matter what anybody said. I wasn't going to get clean until I was ready. And it took a man breaking me to that degree to make me ready. And so I went to rehab. I did 8 months of inpatient rehab. This was when I was living back in Georgia. It taught me everything I needed to know. Like for years, I'd been trying to get clean, but I had never done any of that internal work. There's so much healing to be done. There's so much learning and educating. And I had to learn about really what addiction was and why I was an addict, why I continued to cope in these ways. And rehab taught me all of that. I dove into NA. I dove into the meetings. I was doing 2 meetings a day for months. Met some of the coolest people in my life, but also met some of the worst. I was surrounded by people that had all been struggling the same way I had. And it was really therapeutic, really healing, but wild. But I highly suggest to anyone, they say, I've heard, it's not necessarily a drug problem, it's a me problem. And that really resonated for me when I was in rehab. I realized like I had put the drugs down and I was still making crazy mistakes. I stole a rehab van with the buddy that got me in, that we had been using together for years. Me and him stole a rehab van and totaled it, totally sober. And I remember crawling up, like army crawling up a hill, bloody, gashed up. And I was like, damn, this is what they mean. It's a me problem. I'm sober. And I still am making bad decisions. It was actually in rehab that I did my last relapse. That was January 6th of this year. I think it was part of my journey for a reason. It knocked me down. It really humbled me. It taught me so much. And that was the relapse that changed everything for me. And I will never go back. And I have been over 10 months clean since. So rehab saved my life. Anybody that is watching this and that is possibly considering going, I spent years denying that I needed that much help because I just was so scared of the stigma, like that meant admitting to everyone what had been going on. Of course, my family and close friends knew, but that meant admitting to everybody that maybe I had stolen from or done something suspicious or acted weird. And they thought in their head, like, what's going on with her? All of a sudden, like when I went to rehab, I had to claim all of that shit, I had to hold myself accountable for the person that I had been. If I wanted to be the person I wanted to be, I had to do that. And that was a terrifying process, but I did it. I left rehab in May of this year. And 3 days later, I moved to California with a book bag on my back. My brother lives out here in San Francisco. And when I left rehab, I just knew, they say people, places, things. I think I am clean to this day because I left all of that. I had created such a toxic environment for myself. And I just knew myself at that point. I knew that if I went back to my hometown, I would go back to doing the same things. I almost got back with my husband, which would have been the worst mistake, but I just knew that if I went back home, I was not going to thrive there. I was never meant to thrive there. And so I moved to California. My life has changed completely since being out here. I actually decided to make a TikTok page. And, you know, for a while I had been laughing at it, you know, that kids app and like everybody dances on there, blah, 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 you know, all the making fun of. But one day I got the app, and I had posted, you know, a few videos, but I was having a hard day one day, and I just posted a video that kind of shared my recovery story on there. And I went to sleep. I remember waking up the next day, and I was terrified when I went to sleep. I was nervous about it because I was just like, what is this opening me up to? You know, I was scared that like posting this meant that, you know, everybody, like putting it online was a big deal, because I had held myself accountable to the people, like, you know, that knew me and all those things. But that was like, hey, you really are an addict. Like, let's put it out on the table. But I did. I was so scared to do that. But I woke up the next morning to so much love and admiration and, you know, just support, hundreds of comments of people just telling me how proud they were of me, of strangers telling me how proud they were of me. You know, sometimes that almost means more. It's almost more powerful. And that was the day that social media changed for me. I hated social media. I had been relentlessly bullied by a girl on social media previously. Like, it had been toxic in my life. But all of a sudden, it was this really beautiful thing. And I remember with Elena, I had told my family and my friends, everyone knew about Elena and Cheryl, you know, everybody knew her story. And I always talked about how Elena's story changed my life. And I knew that I had a testimony that maybe could change a life out there too. But I was never brave enough to share it. I was terrified to share it. I thought that I would be met with so much judgment and hate. So I spent a lot of time not sharing it. The day I decided to recover out loud, everything has changed for me. And I think I almost have like 94,000 people, recovering addicts, following me on TikTok and following my story and my journey. It's the most beautiful thing for my life to have finally come full circle. You know, I remember watching people's videos and thinking like, there's no way that life is for me. But today that life is for me. And I'm making the videos that maybe somebody out there is thinking, maybe that life can be for me too, you know? That's all I'm trying to do, is show anyone that this is possible for anybody. You know, I was not supposed to make it out. I was the girl that was not going to make it out. But here I am, you know, 10 months clean. I had somebody telling me the other day that my video made them put a needle down, you know? I think there's so much power in telling our stories. I think there's so much power in recovering out loud. There's always somebody that's listening that maybe relates to one single little piece of your story, and that can change everything for them. Don't be scared to share your truth. Don't be scared to admit to being the person you were, because life is forever changing. We always have the opportunity to change with it. You know, I can promise you that by far my best day sober, or my best day high, will always be way worse than my worst day sober. You know, today I can handle life on life's terms. I can handle emotions and grief and pain without having to put a straw up my nose to handle it. That is freedom. And I wish that for anybody. So if you're watching this and you're wondering if maybe you should chase it too, I can promise you that it's worth it. If you want to follow my journey on TikTok, my handle is Amy's World, AMYZWRLD. I hope to see you there. Thank you. I just spilled